So we'll begin with our meditation practice. I want to invite everyone to take a comfortable seat, whatever that means for you. We each come into the practice from different places with different circumstances and different needs. So what might be a comfortable, conducive posture or seat for one person may look very differently for another, and that's absolutely fine. Taking a moment to find that comfortable seat. If we are seated in chairs, this might be a good time to reconnect our feet or our shoes with the floor or ground beneath us, perhaps pedaling through a couple of steps to find that place of stability or strength, groundedness. If we are sitting on the floor or on a pillow or even in our chairs in a cross-legged position, perhaps a moment here to more deeply and with more intention connect our tailbones, our sit bones to the seat beneath us. If you haven't already done so, an invitation here to close the eyes, or if it feels more comfortable and accessible to us, to simply soften the gaze. To minimize on distractions, we ask that everyone make sure that they are muted out on the call. You may keep your camera on or off as you feel comfortable doing. If you'd like to use this as a time to be more intentional about cultivating an intimate private space, it's perfectly fine to turn your camera off or keep it off. If you'd like to use this as an opportunity, perhaps to reach out and extend to others, to give and receive energy and nourishment and encouragement, perhaps a nice opportunity to keep our cameras on. As we begin to unplug, so to speak, from the external sensations around us, perhaps here turning more intentionally into our breath, into the sensations of our body, and perhaps even into an inventory of our mind, of our thoughts, just to check in. We'll begin, as we generally do, taking 3 deep breaths together, breathing in deeply through the nostrils, holding the breath perhaps for a few moments, a few beats, and then releasing the breath either through the nostrils again, or if it feels more comfortable to us, softly between the lips, allowing that breath to be full and extended, not uncomfortable, but also perhaps a bit of a stretch. We'll breathe together. You can feel free to follow the pattern of my breath, or if another pace feels right for you or feels more comfortable for you, please go ahead and follow that. We'll begin with 3 intentional deep breaths in and out together. Breathing in deeply. A second breath. And out. One more time. Breathing in. We can continue to breathe these deep, full breaths if it feels right to us. We're taking a moment here to allow the breath to find its own rhythm, its own pace. Noticing perhaps here a temptation to control the breath, to manipulate it in some way, to force it into some preconceived notion of what meditative breathing is supposed to be. And just giving ourselves permission to let go of those expectations and just to allow the breath to be what it is in this moment. Our breath is perhaps the most natural, self-regulating, simple, and yet profound activity that we perform. It doesn't depend on our expertise or strategy. It hardly even requires our effort. It's happening all the time, constantly, animating us and keeping us alive. This precious gift, this causeless grace. Just taking a moment to be aware, to notice this wonderful miracle that takes place with every breath in and every breath out. Noticing the physical sensation that goes with the breath, any movements in our body, however big or small. Noticing the rising and falling, the filling up and the emptying out. There's no need to judge it or to evaluate or analyze it. It's enough just to notice. When we notice with genuine curiosity, that noticing naturally gives way to appreciation, perhaps to gratitude. When we notice as children notice, with wonder and amazement, allowing ourselves to naturally experience awe, to experience wonder. When we do that, it's natural to settle into a place of feeling appreciation, of experiencing gratitude, of awareness of the gifts. If that appreciation and gratitude is coming up for us, a moment here to feel it more deeply, to draw it into us like an embrace. To sit with it and in it. If that doesn't feel accessible to us right now, that's okay. We can simply notice and allow whatever comes with that noticing to arise, recognizing that this moment, like our breath, is a gift. And like the best of gifts, it need not be something planned or expected. It can surprise us. It can awaken our curiosity. Allowing ourselves to trust in this moment as the gift that we need right now. Continuing to notice the breath. And if we feel our minds wandering or thoughts drifting, with kindness, simply bringing the mind, the thoughts back to the breath, back to noticing. As we near the end of this short practice together, perhaps taking a moment or two to set an intention, perhaps an intention for the rest of the day, for the rest of the week, or if we feel inspired, setting an intention for a longer period of time, perhaps even an intention that we'd like to carry on beyond some specific end time. whatever intention is arising for us. Once it's there, if it's there, we can hold on to that intention and use these final moments as our meditation closes to align our breath to our intention, breathing in the feeling of possibility and potential, breathing out that intention, breathing out that aspiration, that way we would like to more deeply connect with ourselves, with others, with the universe. We'll take 3 final deep breaths together, breathing in the possibilities, the potential, breathing out, grounding ourselves in our intention. Taking a nice deep breath in and out. Breathing in again. And releasing. A final deep breath in and out. Taking a little bit of time and in a way that feels comfortable to us, beginning to open the eyes or widen the gaze. If we'd like to, we can rub the palms together, creating warmth, and then bring those warmed hands, those palms to our eyes, opening our eyes and our gaze into our palms. And then returning our gaze and our awareness to the room around us and to our gathering together. Thank you again for joining us. We will transition into our sharing of wisdom or reflecting on wisdom. I want to invite everyone to really use this as an opportunity to reflect on not just what you experienced in the practice, but perhaps if for whatever is coming up for you, just being open to those possibilities. In fact, this is something that I'd like to reflect on a little bit today. For today's reflection, I'd like to offer this affirmation or this reflection that invites us to look at the idea of spring. Everything exists in dynamic cycles and seasons. Spring reminds us to reawaken to our potential, to renew our commitments and intentions, and to reimagine new possibilities. So you might be wondering why we're speaking so much about spring today, why we're reflecting on spring when, for most of us, if you're joining us from this part of the world, chances are you're going to look outside of your window and see the landscape blanketed in snow, and perhaps you're already preparing for another snowfall. So it seems a little odd to think about spring, but as some of you may know, today is a very special sacred day in the Hindu calendar. It is known as Vasant Panchami, and Vasant Panchami is often considered, it's traditionally considered the first day of spring. So it's a celebration of the start of spring. And I thought this was a nice and more than nice, an auspicious occasion to reflect on, because so much of our practice, if we're open to it, can connect us to the natural rhythms of nature. And so these seasons have something to teach us. And spring especially has this beautiful lesson of reawakening, of renewal, and of reimagining. So we see this image, hopefully you can see on the screen, this image of a child experiencing springtime, experiencing the wonder. There's something so simple and yet so beautiful about it. And so much of spring evokes for us this idea of almost unlimited discovery, almost limitless potentiality and possibility. There is a verse in the Bhagavad Gita where Sri Krishna, the speaker of the Gita, who in the text is understood to be the divine himself, speaks about and evokes this idea of spring. He says, Brihat Sama Tata Samnam Gayatri Chandasamaham Masanam Marga Shirshoham Ritunam Kusum Akarha. Of sacred hymns, he says, I am the Brihat Sama, which is sung at midnight. Of poetry, I am the Gayatri, the very famous, beautiful, poetic meter of the Gayatri. Of months, he says, I am the harvest month, which is known as Marga Shirsha. And the piece that I'd like to focus on today is he says, of seasons, Ritunam, he says, Kusum Akaraha, I am the flower-bearing spring. There are many words for spring in the Sanskrit language and in beautiful Sanskrit poetry. This one is particularly, I think, meaningful in that it evokes a special quality of spring, kusum akaraha. Kusum means flower, and akaraha means it is something that is abiding in and has an abundance of, it's bearing it. So kusum akara is a beautiful phrase for spring, which means that which bears unlimitedly flowers, which blossoms forth, which gives us, graces us with flowers. So I'd like to look at this idea of flower-bearing spring. When we think about flower-bearing spring, we can think about it in three related ways, three connected, interconnected ways. We can think about spring as a time of reawakening. If we think about the seasons being like cycles of rest and activity. So much of the winter that we've experienced, and at least in this part of the world continue to experience, is in one sense a natural time for rest, for for going within, a kind of like a hibernation almost. And that may not be a literal hibernation for us, although sometimes we may want it to be. We may feel like, well, I just want to sleep through this cold winter. But there's a reason for that, right? It's a time of resting. It's a time of bringing things to a close. And spring offers us the other side of that coin. Spring offers us the opportunity to awaken or to reawaken. So there's an idea that potentiality is always there. It's dormant, perhaps. There's a natural dormancy, which is also healthy for us in the spiritual winter. But when that dormancy, if we stay with it too long, then it can become a kind of a complacency. And so spring is there to remind us of the need to reawaken that potential, to shake things up, to reinvigorate. And so that potential is reawakened, and it can show up through our practice and in our practice. And in a similar way, and I hope you were able to experience this a little bit in the practice, there is an invitation here to connect more deeply with intention and perhaps to renew intention. So spring is also a time of renewal. We're often used to thinking of it in terms of life and of new life, but it's a renewal of life. It's a renewal of intention. And so it's a great opportunity, just as often in many cultures, the new year is a time of setting intentions and aspirations, resolutions even. Spring ends up being this wonderful occasion to renew our intention. And along those lines, there's this third component of possibility, of reimagining, of allowing ourselves to reimagine. What felt closed and limited can become open and limitless, right? We can feel that energy. We can reconnect to that energy and reimagine possibility. We're not bound to what happened in the past. We can acknowledge and honor the past. We can aspire towards the future, but we can also, and we especially in our practice, are invited to recognize the unlimited possibility of now, of this moment, of the present. And so spring is this invitation to honor the past, to recognize and aspire towards the future, but to reimagine this moment in the present. I want to leave us with an invitation, as we sometimes do, an invitation to take this opportunity to do a little bit of work, a little bit of investigation, a little bit of homework, so to speak. So what I want to invite you to do, if this feels accessible to you, to do this in written form, to use a favorite journal or something like that, I think that's especially powerful. If you're not so much into journaling, or you're not such a writer, perhaps even doing this as a kind of a spoken exercise or a visualization, whatever it looks like for you. I especially like doing this as a written exercise. But to envision what spring looks like for you. And a powerful way of doing this is if you take a notebook, if you take a journal or a piece of paper, and maybe just splitting it in half, or opening it up so you have two pages facing each other. And on one side, we can write, I'm going to do this in the opposite order. In one side, we can write, what are those flowers that we'd like this spring to bloom and to blossom for us? And here we might think about the flowers as, what are those offerings to ourselves that we want to show up in our lives, in our lived experience? What are those offerings to others? And what are those offerings ultimately to the universe? What do we want to put out as our offering of love? And then on that other side, right, we see the beautiful flower, but do we take the time to reflect on what went into making those flowers possible? And so on that other page, or on that other side, perhaps we can start to identify what kind of soil do we want to cultivate? In other words, what kind of consciousness, what kind of um, energy do we want to create around us and for ourselves? What is that soil going to be from which the flowers will bloom and blossom? And of course, within that soil, we're planting seeds. So, what are those seed like intentions that we'd like to plant? And so we can have that nicely tilled soil. We can plant those seeds, but we need to water the seed. And so, what is the water? Perhaps the water can be our sadhana or our practice, whatever that means for us. For some of us, that means a seated meditation practice. For some of us, it's silent. For some of us, it's mantra based. For some of us, our physical asana practice, if we're practitioners of asana yoga, that can be part of it, or devotional practices, but whatever makes up that life-giving water for us, that activates and animates that seed of intention planted in the soil of our consciousness. Let's start to recognize what is that healthy, life-giving water for us. And along with the water, let's think about that kind of nourishment, that kind of fertilizer that that invigorates, that nourishes that seed and allows it to grow in the healthiest possible way. And here, an invitation to reflect on what is our sangha, this word in Sanskrit, which means that which we associate with, that which we keep close to us, whether it's in the form of other people, as it's often used. Who are the people that are close to us, that nourish us, that inspire and encourage us? But Sangha can also take the form of the books that we read, the sounds that we allow into our space, the music, the words of instruction and wisdom, the conversations we have. Right? So Sangha can mean so much in terms of what are we connecting with, associating with, and the spaces that we're inhabiting. Right? So if we can reflect on what is our soil, what is our seed, what is our water and our nourishment, all of that then contributing to what are these flowers that we want to see bloom and blossom. And if we can do that, then we have, in one sense, we have a plan for our own spiritual spring. And so it's kind of, in one sense, it's kind of nice. It's kind of a blessing in disguise, maybe, that on this first day of spring, at least in terms of this cultural context, and this auspicious day that marks the first day of spring, we have time. So we can use this as an opportunity to really reflect on and decide for ourselves our consciousness, our intention, our practice, our sangha, and those flowers that we want to blossom forth. I want to thank you all again for joining. I know we're a little bit past our end time of 12:30, so I understand if folks need to go. If those who can stay, if you would like to stay, I'm happy to stay for a few more minutes and to take any questions, or if anyone would like to share a comment or a reflection, how the practice was for you, what this idea of flower-bearing spring brings up for you. Thank you all for the kind words that are coming into the chat box, encouraging words. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Well, I'm so grateful to have spent this time with you all, and I hope that you'll continue to join us as you're able. We'll gather every Tuesday at noon, and we'll try our best. I know I struggle with this sometimes, but we try to keep it to about a half an hour. And we will continue to have guided meditation and reflections like this. So please do tune in as you are able to. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day and wonderful rest of your week to come.